The metal clanking of the cell door each morning reminded Ashton Crane that this was not a bad dream. Bridgeport County Jail became his home for the next 7 years. 4 concrete walls, an iron bunk, and a toilet without a lid. His world shrunk to the size of a cage. Ashton was accustomed to waking up 15 minutes before rising to collect his thoughts before another day that was destined to be a carbon copy of the last. The first year of his incarceration passed in a state of stupor for Ashton. An armed robbery that was supposed to provide him and Jessica with money for a down payment on a house turned into a nightmare. Ashton remembered the confused face of the young cashier as he pointed the gun at her, remembered the screeching alarm and the blue flashing lights. Jessica knew nothing of his plan. When he was sentenced, she cried in the courtroom, biting her lip until it bled. "Crane, the letter!" The guard tossed a white envelope over the bars. Ashton picked it up on the fly, fingers trembling. For the first 2 years, Jessica had written weekly. Now it was once a month, if not less. He opened the envelope carefully, careful not to damage the contents. 3 pages, written in familiar handwriting with a slight slant to the left, smaller than usual. Jessica used to write at least 5 pages, talking about her work at the hospital, her parents, her friends, the books she'd read, the movies she'd seen. Now it was all down to dry facts, what happened at work, what she had for lunch, what the weather was like outside. "Dear Ashton, I hope you're doing well. I'm sorry I haven't written for 2 weeks. I've been very busy at work. We have a new head of department, requiring us to fill out tons of extra paperwork. I'm getting tired and coming home late." Ashton ran his eyes over the rest of the letter. Not a line about how much she missed him, how she waited for his return, how much she loved him. Just everyday life, just the facts. Like a report to her superiors, not a letter to her beloved husband. Something had changed. Ashton could feel it in his gut. In the yard, where the prisoners were taken out for an hour a day, Ashton sat on a bench against the wall and reread the letter over and over, as if trying to find something between the lines that wasn't there. "I never thought I'd see you holding anything but dumbbells." The voice of Ray Connors, his cellmate, pulled Ashton out of his musings. Ray was serving his second sentence for drug distribution. Small, skittish, with intelligent eyes and a thin face, he somehow managed to know everything that was going on not only in prison, but outside of it as well. "The wife writes," Ashton replied briefly. "Wife," Ray piped in, taking a seat next to him. "You know, buddy, I never understood why guys here cling to their broads. It's like drowning and holding onto an anchor." Ashton folded the letter and tucked it into his robe pocket. "Jessica is not an anchor. She's waiting for me," Ray hummed. "Are you sure? Has she come by lately?" Ashton gritted his teeth. Jessica hadn't come for 3 months now. She'd explained it with lack of time, fatigue, difficulties at work. "She has a job," he replied stubbornly. "She's a nurse, saving people's lives." Of course. Ray held up his hands as if defending himself. "It's just weird that she was making time before and now she's not." Ashton remained silent. He'd thought about it himself, but chased the thoughts away. Jessica wasn't like that. They've been together since they were 16. She was the only one who had never doubted him. In the evening, lying in his bunk, Ashton listened to Ray tell stories to the other inmates. About how Warden Jenkins got a dose of cocaine every Friday. About how one of the inmates on the 3rd floor was planning an escape. How one Mitch's wife from cell block C is now sleeping with his brother. "Women can't wait, boys." Ray's voice sounded heartfelt. "They'll always find a replacement, especially the young and beautiful ones." Ashton rolled over onto his other side, clamping his ears shut. He didn't want to hear this, didn't even want to think about the possibility of Jessica being with someone else. But the seed of doubt had already been planted. The next day, Ashton wrote back. He asked how her parents were doing, asked if she'd seen a new movie with her favorite actor, talked about the books he'd borrowed from the prison library. And then he added, "Honey, I miss you so much. Maybe you can come down this coming weekend. I realize you're tired at work, but I need to see you so badly." The response had to wait almost 2 weeks. Ashton asked the guards every day if there was any mail for him and saw them look over their shoulder. Finally, the letter came. Shorter than the last one. Only a page and a half. "I'm sorry, Ashton, but I won't be able to make it this coming weekend. The hospital's on strike, and I've picked up extra shifts. I need the money because the rent's going up, but my paycheck isn't. Maybe in a couple weeks. Ashton clenched the letter in his fist. In a couple weeks. Always in a couple weeks. Jessica used to turn down extra shifts if they fell on a date day. Said she could make extra money on another day, but seeing her husband was more important to her. What changed? Bad news? Ray, as usual, came out of nowhere. The cellmate had an uncanny ability to sneak up silently. Let me guess, the wife's not coming? Ashton nodded, not trusting his voice. You know, I heard something. Ray lowered his voice. Some laundry guy. His wife works at the same hospital as your Jessica. Ashton looked up, feeling a chill go down inside. I? Word is your wifey's become very friendly with the new doctor. Kevin Dodson, I think that's his name. Tall blonde guy, just out of residency. They have lunch together in the cafeteria and he gives her a ride home after her shift. Ashton felt the blood drain from his face. Ray is lying, has to be lying, or passes on other people's lies. Jessica couldn't. Lying, he squeezed out. Ray shrugged. Why would I have to lie? I'm just relaying what I heard. Maybe they really are just coworkers, though it's weird that she suddenly stopped visiting you, and the letters are getting shorter. Ashton clenched his jaws to a crunch. He would write to her. Ask her directly. No, he shouldn't. If it's true, she'll lie. And if it wasn't true, she'd take offense at the mistrust. For the next 2 weeks, Ashton couldn't find it. He reread Jessica's letters over the past months, trying to find hints, references to this Kevin, and he did. My colleagues and I went out to lunch, Dr. Dodson told a funny story. I was late at work because I was helping with paperwork. Colleagues, Dr. Dodson. Those words sounded different now. When the next letter arrived, Ashton read it, feeling the emptiness growing inside. Jessica wrote about the new nurses' uniforms, about how her kitchen faucet had broken and she'd had to call a plumber, about the forecast calling for rain over the weekend, and not a word about the visit, not one miss you, love you, waiting. You know, Ray, Ashton said that evening, lying on his bunk and staring at the ceiling, I want to request a visit in the briefing room. Ray whistled. Really? That's only for family counseling and important case questions. That's what family counseling is, Ashton replied, feeling his lips stretch themselves into a smile that didn't involve his eyes. I need to have a serious talk with my wife. The next day, Ashton made the request. The warden had said no at first. The meeting room was rarely available for private meetings. But Ashton's behavior had been impeccable over the years, and after persuasion, he was given the go-ahead. The date was set for a week later, on a Wednesday. Ashton texted Jessica, informing her of the impending visit. The request was official. She couldn't refuse without a good reason. He deliberately left out the fact that he wanted to discuss something important, fearing she'd find an excuse not to come. The answer came quicker than usual. Of course I'll come. Is something wrong? Ashton replied shortly. We'll talk when we meet. The days remaining until the date stretched agonizingly slow. Ashton hardly slept at night, imagining Jessica laughing with this Dr. Dodson, him touching her hand, kissing her. His imagination obligingly drew pictures, one worse than the other. By Wednesday morning, he was exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, and his hands were shaking faintly. You okay, buddy? Ray asked, watching Ashton smooth his hair for the 10th time in front of the shard of mirror mounted over the sink. In full, Ashton cut him off. He was already regretting listening to his cellmate. Maybe none of this was true. Maybe Jessica really just doesn't have time. A nurse's job was hard with an irregular schedule. Maybe he was wrong to suspect her. Crane out. The guard opened the cell. You have a visit. Ashton felt his heart start to beat faster. It was time to learn the truth. The meeting room was different from a normal visiting room. No partitions, no bars. A small room with one table and 2 chairs. Lawyers met here with clients. Psychologists talked to prisoners. And sometimes special family reunions were held here. Ashton went in first and sat down with his hands clasped in front of him. His heart was pounding so hard it sounded like it could be heard throughout the prison. 5 minutes of waiting seemed an eternity. The door opened, and Jessica walked in. Ashton looked up and froze. She looked beautiful, better than he remembered. Hair cut shorter, light makeup, new dress, and something else. some inner glow that hadn't been there before. She looked happy. "Ashton," she smiled, but the smile didn't touch her eyes. Anxiety read in them. "What's wrong? Why did you insist on this meeting?" Jessica Crane woke up an hour before her alarm clock, even though she'd barely slept all night. The meeting with Ashton was scheduled for 10 o'clock in the morning, but her stomach was already twisting with anxiety. She reached for the other side of the bed, empty and cold, but with a flattened pillow. She felt embarrassed and got out of bed abruptly. In the bathroom, Jessica took a long look at her reflection in the mirror. She had changed in the last year. She had cut her hair, lost weight, dressed differently. There was a new confidence in her eyes, and she knew who to thank for that change. The phone on the sink vibrated. A message from Kevin. "Good morning, sunshine. Good luck today. Call me when you're free. Love you." Jessica bit her lip. What was she doing? How could she let things get this far? For 4 months she'd been dating Kevin, knowing full well she had a husband, even if he's in prison, albeit for 7 years. But she'd made a promise, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health. She wasn't going to cheat. When Ashton was locked up, she was sure she would wait for him as long as it took. For the first 2 years, she came every weekend, wrote long letters, sent pictures, and then it got hard. Ashton became more distant, more immersed in prison life. His letters grew shorter, and his conversation topics dried up during their dates. They were married, but it was like they were on different planets. Kevin showed up at the hospital 8 months ago. A young doctor, fresh out of residency, with clear blue eyes and a charming smile. At first, they'd just eaten lunch together in the hospital cafeteria. Then he started giving her rides home after his shift. And 4 months later, she invited him back to her place for the first time, and stayed with him until morning. Jessica sighed and turned on the shower. The water didn't wash away the guilt, but at least it helped her come to her senses. She went through her entire closet, contemplating what to wear. Ashton liked it when she went with jeans and plaid shirts, but Jessica was no longer the type of girl to adjust to her husband's tastes. She chose a simple blue dress, elegant and modest at the same time. At 8:30, the phone rang. Kevin. "Hi." Jessica's voice trembled. "Just wanted to make sure you were okay." Kevin's voice sounded genuinely concerned. "You weren't yourself last night." "I have to see my husband, at his request. Do you think I'm okay?" She didn't want to be rude, but her nerves were on edge. "Jess, you don't have to do that. You can just—" "What, not go? Ashton is my husband, Kevin. I can't just ignore him." There was silence. Then Kevin sighed. "You're right. I'm sorry, it's just that I'm worried about you. Will you tell him about us?" Jessica felt a lump come up to her throat. "I don't know. I guess I will. If he asks directly, I won't lie. I understand. Call me when it's over?" "Sure." The drive to the prison took 40 minutes. Jessica drove, gripping the steering wheel tightly and trying to think of what she would tell Ashton. The truth? What if he didn't ask directly? Lie? But why continue this farce? She didn't want to hurt him, but she couldn't keep living a lie either. The closer the prison got, the harder she breathed. Nothing had changed in the 3 months she hadn't been here. The same gray walls, the same barbed wire over the high fence, the same guards at the gate. Jessica parked and headed toward the checkpoint on stiff legs. "Jessica Crane, for a date with inmate Ashton Crane," she pronounced to the guard. "Ah, Mrs. Crane," the guard grinned. "Haven't seen you in a while." Jessica remained silent. The procedure was familiar to her. Metal detector, bag check, surrendering her phone and other prohibited items. Then she was escorted into the building and handed over to another guard. "Warren Paxton," he introduced himself. "I'll escort you to the briefing room." Paxton was a tall, middle-aged man with tired eyes. He led Jessica down the long hallways, nodding occasionally to the other guards. "Do you know why your husband requested a meeting in the briefing room?" he asked suddenly. Jessica shook her head. "Presumably he wants to discuss something important. Usually prisoners use such meetings for serious family conversations, or to discuss legal matters." Jessica clutched her purse in her hand. Serious family talk. "Yeah, that sounded about right." "We'll be alone? No surveillance?" she asked. "There are no cameras in the room, but I'll be on duty outside the door. It's enough to knock if you need anything." They stopped at an unremarkable door. Paxton opened it and gestured for Jessica to enter. Ashton was already waiting in the room. Jessica froze on the threshold. Ashton had changed. Slim, gaunt, dark circles under his eyes. But it was the look in his eyes. Heavy, penetrating. Jessica realized he knew, or suspected. "Ashton," she tried to smile. "What's wrong? Why did you insist on this meeting?" The door closed behind her back. They were left alone. Ashton stared at her in silence. Jessica felt a chill run down her spine. She hesitantly sat down across from her husband. "You look beautiful." There was no warmth in his voice. "New haircut? New dress?" "Thank you." Jessica put her hands on the table, then rested them in her lap. "How are you? You look tired." "Not sleeping well lately." Ashton leaned forward. "You know why? I'm plagued by thoughts of what my wife is doing while I'm sitting here." Jessica swallowed. This was it, the moment of truth. "Ashton, 3 months, Jess," he interrupted. 3 months you haven't come. Your letters have been shorter and shorter. No miss, no love. Just reports about what you had for breakfast and what the weather was like outside. I have a lot of work to do." She tried to sound calm. "And I'm tired." "So tired that you can't write an extra line? Or spend 1 day a month visiting your husband?" Jessica lowered her eyes. She must tell the truth, must stop this. But the words stuck in her throat. "Ashton, listen." She took a deep breath. "These 3 years have been hard, for both of us. You're here in your world. I'm out there in mine. I feel like we're drifting apart." "And that's why you found a replacement?" Jessica flinched as if from a slap. "What?" "Don't pretend you don't know what I mean." Ashton pounded his fist on the table. "Kevin Dodson, the doctor from your hospital, the tall blonde guy, the one who drives you home after your shift." Jessica's breath caught. How did he know? How do you... Never mind. Ashton looked her straight in the eye. "Tell me the truth, Jess. Are you sleeping with him?" Jessica looked away. She could have lied. She could deny everything. Say Kevin was just a coworker, just a friend. Ashton couldn't prove anything, but she was tired of lying. "Yes," she said quietly. "Yes, I'm dating him." Ashton leaned back in his chair as if her words had physically hit him in the chest. His face contorted in pain. "How long has it been?" 4 months. 4 months, he repeated, as if he couldn't believe his ears. 4 months you've been lying to me, writing letters, pretending everything was fine, that you were just busy. I didn't mean to hurt you." A tear rolled down Jessica's cheek. "I didn't plan it, Ashton. It just happened that way. We bonded at work and you decided that promises meant nothing? That our marriage was nothing?" "No, I felt so alone. And you've gotten farther and farther away. Your letters got shorter too, you know. You've been writing more and more about life here, about the other prisoners, about the books you're reading. It was like you were building a new world for yourself where I didn't belong." "I was building a world?" Ashton shook his head. "Jess, all I thought about every day was you. Counted the days until we met. Planned what we'd do when I got out. And you just found a replacement for me." "He's not a replacement," Jessica blurted out, and immediately regretted her words. "No? Then what is he?" Jessica covered her face with her hands. This conversation was even harder than she had imagined. She wanted to explain to Ashton that she still loved him, in her own way. But she also loved Kevin. How could she explain that to a man who would give 7 years of his life for a robbery done for her? "I don't know what to say," she finally said. "I'm confused, Ashton. I didn't mean for it to come out this way." "But it did." His voice grew harsher. "And now what? You've come to tell me you're filing for divorce?" Jessica looked up. She wasn't thinking about divorce. Honestly, she was trying not to think about the future at all. "I don't know. Maybe we should take a break. Think about what we really want? Really... pause?" Ashton laughed, but there was no mirth in his laughter. "I've got 4 more years here, Jess. What pause? You just want my blessing to sleep with that doctor without feeling guilty." "That's not fair." "Unfair?" Ashton leaned forward. "You know what's unfair? That I'm sitting here for the robbery I did for us, so we could have a home, a family, a future, And you going behind my back? I didn't ask you to rob that store. Jessica raised her voice. That was your decision, Ashton. A stupid, irresponsible decision. She saw something change in his eyes. It was as if a light had gone out. Jessica bit her tongue, but it was too late. The words were already out. I understand now. Ashton spoke softly, almost a whisper. It's not about the loneliness. It's not about distance. You just found someone better, a successful doctor instead of an ex-mechanic with a criminal record. No, it's not. Jessica reached across the table to take his hand, but Ashton yanked his hands away. Don't touch me. Ashton, please, let's talk calmly. I realize you're angry, but... Angry? He grinned again. I'm not angry, Jess, I'm destroyed. You were the only thing keeping me afloat in this hole, the thought that someday we'd be together again. And now there's nothing. Jessica felt tears streaming down her cheeks. She had broken him. The man she had once loved more than anything in the world. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm really sorry. How old is he? This doctor? 32, like you. And how did you two meet? Jessica didn't understand why he needed these details, but decided to answer. Maybe it would help him accept the situation. He came to the hospital 8 months ago. We worked the same shift. At first, we just talked on our breaks. Then we started having lunch together. He was interested in my life, my problems. He was easy to be with. And difficult with me? Ashton asked bitterly. With you, different. Jessica struggled to find the words. We were so young when we met, almost children. We grew up together, but maybe we grew in different directions. And you only realized that when the doctor on the white horse showed up? No, Ashton. I felt it for a long time, I just didn't want to admit it to myself. Ashton looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Maybe he had. Maybe he'd really never known the real Jessica, only the version he'd painted for himself. Does he love you? He asked after a long silence. Yes. Jessica didn't hesitate. Yes, he does. And you him? She closed her eyes. This was it, the point of no return. Yes, Ashton, I love him. Ashton clenched his fists so hard his knuckles turned white. Jessica could see the effort it was costing him to stay calm. His gaze became frighteningly blank, and his face frozen like a mask. She'd never seen him like this before, and suddenly felt a chill of fear run down her spine. Ashton? She called out quietly. Are you okay? He rose slowly from his chair, and Jessica recoiled involuntarily. The room was suddenly very quiet, so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. Everything I've done, Ashton said in a quiet, lifeless voice, I've done for you. Jessica felt fear stiffen her body. Ashton looked strange. His face seemed petrified, only the jowls walking beneath his skin. His eyes, once full of warmth, now seemed like two black holes. She'd never seen him like this, in all the 10 years of their relationship. Ashton, please sit down, she tried to speak calmly, even though everything was trembling inside. Let's just talk. Talk? He grinned, but it wasn't a smile. It was a grin. What else is there to talk about, Jess? You've said it all. You love someone else. He took a step toward her, and Jessica instinctively pulled back. You know what I've been thinking about every day here? Ashton looked around the gray walls of the room. About you. About how I'm going to come back and we're going to start over. We'll buy a house, have kids, live the life we've always dreamed of. His voice broke, and for a second Jessica thought she saw the old Ashton in front of her. The one she'd fallen in love with back in high school. The one she'd married in her 20s. Ashton, I never meant to hurt you. She held out her hand, but he took a step back. But you did, he said, steel ringing in his voice. You've ruined everything I've held on to, everything I put up with this hell for. Ashton moved toward her again, and this time Jessica didn't have time to pull away. He grabbed her shoulders, his fingers digging into her skin. Ashton, you're hurting me! She tried to pull free, but the grip only tightened. Hurt? He leaned in so close to her that she could feel his breath on her cheek. You don't know what pain is, Jess. That's the pain of knowing that your wife, your soulmate, is sleeping with someone else while you rot in jail. Let me go. Jessica finally broke free and bounced toward the door. If you don't calm down, I'll call security. Call them. He shrugged. I don't care. I don't care now." Those words frightened her even more than his anger. There was such hopeless desperation in them that it took her breath away. "Ashton, I understand that you're angry. You have a right to be. But time heals. You'll find someone else when you get out." "Find someone else?" He laughed, but the laugh sounded more like a sob. "Jess, I don't want someone else. I want you. Just you. Always wanted only you." He took another step toward her. Jessica felt the cold door with her back. There was nowhere to run. "Do you remember how we met?" Ashton asked suddenly. "You were sitting in the library studying for a chemistry exam, and I couldn't stop looking at you. You were so beautiful, so focused. It took me 3 days to gather the courage to approach you." Jessica remembered. Of course she remembered. The shy boy with the disheveled hair and the most charming smile she'd ever seen. "I remember," she answered quietly. "And our first kiss? On the beach, under the stars. You said you'd never felt so alive." Jessica closed her eyes. Memories came in waves, and with them guilt, bitterness, regret. "Ashton, please." "And our wedding?" He continued as if he hadn't heard her. "You were so beautiful in that simple white dress. Everyone said we were the perfect couple, that we were made for each other." He was beside her again, his hand touching her cheek. Jessica flinched but didn't pull away. The touch was gentle, almost reverent. "How could you throw it all away?" he whispered. "How could you betray everything we had?" "I didn't mean to." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I swear I didn't mean to. But you're here and I'm out there and I'm so alone, Ashton. So fucking lonely." "I'm lonely too." He slammed his fist against the wall next to her head, and Jessica shrieked. "Do you have any idea what it's like to be here? It's the same thing every day. Same walls, same faces, same food. The only thing that kept me sane was the thought of you. Of us." His face contorted in pain, and for a second Jessica thought he was about to cry, but instead there was something new in his eyes, something cold and determined. "And now I have nothing," he uttered. "Nothing worth holding on to." Jessica tried to pull away, but there was nowhere to retreat to. She was already pressing her back against the door. "Ashton, you only have 4 years left. That's not an eternity. You'll get out and start a new life." "Without you," he shook his head. "What's the point of that?" Ashton's hands were back on her shoulders, but now the grip wasn't as painful, almost gentle. His face softened, and for a second the old Ashton, her Ashton, flashed in him. "Tell me you still love me," he whispered. "Tell me that this doctor doesn't mean anything, that you'll wait for me. And I'll forgive everything, Jess. I swear I'll forgive everything." Jessica closed her eyes. She could lie. She could say what he wanted to hear. It was probably the safest option, but she was tired of lying, tired of pretending. "I can't," she replied quietly. "I cared about you, Ashton. Part of me still cares, but I can't promise what I don't have." She felt his hands tense on her shoulders. Slowly, she opened her eyes and watched his face change. The softness was gone, replaced by something dark, something primal. "So that's it." His voice was barely audible. And then his hands moved to her neck, smoothly, almost caressingly. Jessica didn't immediately realize what was happening, and when she did, it was too late. Ashton's fingers tightened, cutting off the air. Jessica tried to push him away, but he was too strong. "Ashton!" she wheezed. "Please!" But there wasn't an ounce of compassion in his eyes, only cold determination and some wild, almost animalistic frenzy. "If I can't be with you," he whispered, "then no one will." Jessica tried desperately to break free. She clawed at his arms, kicked, but it was all useless. Black dots danced in front of her eyes. Her lungs burned from lack of oxygen. Out of the corner of her eye, she heard something fall with a clatter of a metal chair. She must have hit it as they struggled. But it didn't matter. Nothing else mattered except the air, which was gone. Jessica tried with her last strength to knock on the door, to call for help. But her hands wouldn't listen. Her legs gave out and she began to sink to the floor. Ashton sank down with her, never loosening his grip. His face was right in front of her, distorted, almost inhuman. This wasn't the Ashton she knew. This was someone else, something else. "I'm sorry," she tried to utter, but only a wheeze escaped her throat. The world began to darken around the edges. Jessica felt consciousness slipping away. One last thought slipped into her fading brain. Kevin. She wouldn't call him. He would be worried. And then it was gone. Ashton didn't immediately realize that Jessica was no longer resisting. He continued to squeeze her throat until she collapsed in his arms. Only then did he let go. She fell to the floor like an abandoned doll, eyes open but unseeing. On her neck were the red marks of his fingers. Ashton stared at her, not realizing what had happened, what he had done. Reality slowly returned, breaking through the shroud of rage. "Jess?" He knelt down beside her. "Jess, wake up." He shook her by the shoulders, but she didn't respond. Ashton put his fingers to her neck, trying to feel for a pulse. Nothing. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." A wave of panic came over him. What had he done? How could this be happening? He just wanted her to listen, to understand his pain. He wasn't going to... A metal chair lay on the floor a couple feet away from them. Ashton crawled over to it, grabbed it, and slammed it to the floor with force. The sound was deafening in the silence of the room. He hit it again and again, until the chair leg broke off. Ashton took it like a spear. The cold metal in his hand was sobering. He knew what he was doing, and he knew why. He turned back to Jessica's still body. His Jessica, his wife, the only woman he'd ever loved. "I'm sorry," he whispered, lifting the metal stem over her chest. "I can't be without you." Then lowered it forcefully. Once, another, a third, until his hand was numb and his shirt was soaked with blood. Her blood. He didn't know how much time had passed. Minutes? Hours? Ashton sat on the floor next to Jessica's body, cradling her head in his lap. He stroked her hair as if she could feel it, whispered words of love as if she could hear them. Somewhere in the periphery of his consciousness, he heard a knock on the door. Voices. But it didn't matter. Nothing else mattered. The door swung open. Men in uniform burst into the room, Officer Paxton in front. His eyes widened with horror at the scene before him. "Jesus Christ," he breathed out. "Prisoner, step away from the woman and put your weapon on the floor," shouted another guard, pointing a stun gun at Ashton. Ashton slowly looked up. He still held the bloody chair leg in his hand. "She cheated on me," he said quietly, as if that explained everything. "Put your weapons on the floor and step away from the body," the guard repeated. Ashton looked at the metal bar in his hand, as if seeing it for the first time, then gently lowered it to the floor and raised his hands. "I'm not resisting," he said. Two guards rushed toward him, flung him to the floor, and clasped his hands behind his back. Ashton didn't resist. He stared at Jessica until his face was pressed against the cold concrete floor. The handcuffs clicked. He was lifted to his feet and led toward the door. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw other guards surrounding Jessica's body. Someone was checking for a pulse. Someone was on the radio. "Call an ambulance and the police," he heard Paxton's voice. "And put a straitjacket on him. This psycho is dangerous." But Ashton wasn't dangerous, not now. All the rage, all the despair was gone, leaving behind a void. He was led to solitary confinement, stripped, straitjacketed. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. Just stared blankly into space. After a while, he didn't know how long, two men entered the cell. One in a policeman's uniform, the other a woman in a strict suit. "I'm Detective Ella Montgomery," she introduced herself. "And this is Officer Jenkins. We'd like to ask you a few questions about what happened, Mr. Crane." Ashton looked up. "Is she dead?" he asked. Detective Montgomery glanced over to the officer. "Yes, Mr. Crane. Mrs. Crane is dead. Do you realize what you've done?" Ashton nodded. "I killed her." "Why?" "She cheated on me, with the doctor at the hospital, said she loved him." The detective wrote something down in her notebook. "And you decided to strangle her?" "I didn't decide." Ashton shook his head. "It just happened. I didn't want to kill her. I wanted her to stay with me." "But you didn't just strangle her, Mr. Crane." The detective turned the page of her notebook. "You also inflicted multiple stab wounds on her with a chair leg. Did that also just happen?" Ashton wondered. He remembered breaking the chair, remembered the medal in his hand, but the moment itself was like a blur. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "All I remember is that I wanted to be with her, always." The detective wrote something down again. "Do you understand what you're facing, Mr. Crane? This is premeditated murder. A life sentence will be added to your current sentence, perhaps even the death penalty." Ashton shrugged his shoulders as far as the straitjacket would allow. "I don't care," he said. "I don't care now." Detective Montgomery sighed and closed her notebook. "Mr. Crane, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you by the state. Do you understand those rights?" "Yes," Ashton nodded. "But I don't need a lawyer. I plead guilty." "Nevertheless, you will need one." The detective rose. "We'll continue this conversation later, when you've been transferred to the county jail." She headed for the door, but Ashton called out to her. "Detective?" She turned around. "Yes, Mr. Crane? Has anyone notified her parents?" The expression on the detective's face softened. "Yes, Mr. Crane. We have informed them." "They must hate me," Ashton pronounced, looking down at the floor. "That shouldn't concern you right now," the detective replied. "You need to think about your own defense." Ashton shook his head. "I don't need protection. I did it. I killed her, and I deserve everything I get." Detective Montgomery looked at him for a long moment, then nodded and walked out of the cell with the officer. The door closed with a metallic clang, leaving Ashton alone with his thoughts. He closed his eyes and saw Jessica's face. Not dead, contorted with fear and pain, but alive, laughing, the way it had been before all this, before the robbery, before prison, before Kevin. "I'm sorry," he whispered into the emptiness of the cell. "I loved you so much." But there was no answer, and there never would be. Outside the prison walls, evening was falling. In a conference room fenced off with police tape, forensic scientists were gathering evidence, taking photos, taking samples. Although there was little need to do so, the case was clear as day. A classic case of jealousy murder. Officer Paxton stood in the hallway, watching the CSI's work through the open door. His face was pale, his hands trembling slightly. "You okay?" a colleague passing by asked. Paxton shook his head. "I should have checked earlier. Should have come in when I heard the noise." "Don't blame yourself," the coworker patted him on the shoulder. "You couldn't have known." "But I knew he was upset. I saw his face when I led him into the room, saw the way he looked at her. Still, you couldn't have predicted what he'd do." Paxton sighed. "You know what the worst part is? I've been working here for 15 years. I've seen all sorts of things, but I never thought Crane was capable of something like this. He's always been normal, calm." "Quiet waters are deep," a colleague observed philosophically. "You never know what's inside a man." "Yeah," Paxton turned away from the door. "You never know." He walked down the hall, trying not to think about what he'd seen in that room, about the dead woman with her eyes open, about the man sitting next to her, cradling her head and stroking her hair like she was just sleeping. Love, Paxton thought, is sometimes scarier than hate.